we're going to transition into something really critical here. Our first panel is the Quantum Panel, sponsored by the University of Maryland, College Park. Thank you, Ken. This panel discusses how to best build a quantum ecosystem of research institutions, government agencies, industry partners, innovative startups, and more. It is going to be moderated by none other than Darryll Pines, who is the president of University of Maryland, College Park. Please help me in welcoming Darryll to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. How you doing? Are you awake? Good morning, everyone. How you doing? You're in class now. And this will be an exam at the end, a quantum exam. So welcome. I'm Darryll Pines. I'm president of the University of Maryland. Just happy to be here at the National Academy of Inventors inauguration event and ceremony. Today, you're going to hear on a panel on quantum innovation, and we have three incredible speakers. But I want to tell you a little bit about University of Maryland, which has been around for about 165 years as one of the original land-grant institutions. And as many of us, we started off with engineering and agriculture as the key components of the land-grant institutions. And today, we're a discovery powerhouse, and we rank in any metric with all the best institutions in innovation and entrepreneurship in any ranking system. Our experience in quantum started in 2006 with the formation of something called the Joint Quantum Institute, a partnership between Maryland and NIST. This institute was our bedrock, focusing on basic research and providing the foundation for all of the quantum advances that came after. Just a year later, in 2007, we were able to recruit a very talented, brilliant scientist named Dr. Chris Monroe, who will be on the panel today, to help develop our quantum ecosystem. That led to our very first patent, or his very first patent, a quantum computing patent that was filed in 2012. It was a quick journey from then to forming a private entity called IonQ, securing private investment, the hiring of a CEO, Peter Chapman, and the IPO that occurred right during the middle, or just at the sort of cusp of the end of the pandemic on October 1st of 2021 on the New York Stock Exchange. That was a great day. And we've been thrilled to see our partnership with IonQ even continue to grow and expand. Together, we have now created something called the National Quantum User Facility that anyone in this room can gain access to, the world's first shared facility where researchers can come in and utilize quantum computers on a wide variety of projects and problems. So we are at the center of a unique assembly of quantum assets and have built strong ties with industry, government partners, and other academic institutions. And we cover all aspects of quantum technology research, from post-quantum cybersecurity to quantum sensing, to quantum networks, to quantum communications, and of course, to quantum computers. Today's quantum panel centers on how best to build a quantum ecosystem of research institutions, government agencies, industry partners, innovative startups, and much, much more. We have three outstanding panelists who continue to play a leading role in the quantum ecosystem of the United States and here in the DC region, which we are now calling the capital of quantum. Please join me in welcoming our three speakers. First, Dr. Laurie Locascio, Director of the National Institute for Standards and Technology and the Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technology. Please give her a round of applause. Dr. Christopher Monroe, Professor at Duke University with a joint appointment and College Park Professor at the University of Maryland, a physicist. Please give him a round of applause. And Dr. Jacob Taylor, former Chief Science Officer at Riverlane and now working for Dr. Locascio at NIST. Please give him a round of applause. So I'm going to direct the first question to Dr. Monroe. So what is quantum? Why is it so important? And what is the difference between today's computers and, of course, quantum computers?
Thank you, Darryll. So we have, 3 hours, right? So we can jump right in. Okay, so what is quantum? Well, I can tell you what it's not. Quantum information processing, quantum computing, is not just the next version of the computer or the communication system that we know. It is based on some radical laws of physics that we know are true at the very simplified form of matter, like atoms and electrons and so forth. In short, we're used to computing and communicating information in bits. That's how we measure bit rates, the strength, the power of a computer. Well, the foundation of quantum information is that we have something called quantum bits that are not just in definite states of 0 and 1, but they can be in a superposition. They can actually store both at the same time, as I like to say, as long as nobody's looking, because it's sort of nonsensical to imagine something that's in, like a water bottle that's in two places at the same time. Quantum allows it, and we can use that opportunity to do amazing things in processing, in terms of computing. There's a massive parallelism that you can take advantage of and compute things you couldn't otherwise. Communication. Through this superposition, we can actually, and again, this is a scientific term, we can teleport things from place to place. Not really things, we're teleporting information. And because of that superposition law, you can do it without a real wire connecting them. So these are exotic laws of physics. They're true, but they haven't been really propagated outside of the research laboratory or the government laboratory or the university. And now, over the last 10 years, we're really seeing technology starting to embrace these laws and invent and build new devices that can take advantage of it. So I'll stop, but before I stop, with these exotic laws, there's exotic hardware that needs to be built in order to take advantage of these systems. Sometimes it requires cooling something to nearly absolute zero, or sometimes it requires having systems in a vacuum chamber. It's some pretty exotic hardware, and as you're all inventors, there's a lot still to be invented, certainly on the hardware side. And it has been in the laboratories for several decades, but now it's starting to make its way out into the engineering front and eventually into production. So it's a very exciting field, and I have to say, like conventional computers in the 60s, 1960s, nobody could foresee what was in the future. Nobody could really foresee the internet in the 1950s and how we do commerce and how our most advanced computers can model things that are extremely complicated. So I would venture to say we still really don't know what the use cases will be for quantum computers at a very high level in the long run. Super exciting. We do know that there will be applications there. We just have to build them and see them come.
Thank you, Chris. By the way, the deeper bios are in your attachments, and you can go and cut to those links. Jake was in the White House, so he really knows how the sausage was made. So my question to him is, how did we get to where we are today with quantum? Can you tell the audience of inventors how you worked on the National Quantum Initiative? How did that come to be?
Well, thank you so much for that question, Darryll. And I will say, to what Chris was talking about, we have been actually using quantum technologies since the 1940s. The first atomic clock built at the National Bureau of Standards, using transitions in ammonia. And there's this limits of communication that we've run into and surpassed by taking advantage of quantum effects of light. So there's this long beat of technology complemented by science. In the 1990s, there was a mathematical discovery of algorithms that run on quantum computers, that don't run on classical computers, that do things we didn't imagine were possible. And that set off a scientific rush. Okay, scientific rushes are actually very slow, but it set off a scientific rush. But by about a decade ago, the requirement to create machines to realize these complex quantum states of matter and control them started to exceed what was possible in an individual professor's laboratory or in a small-scale environment. And so companies started to form, or large tech companies started to buy up teams, because it is this interconnection of engineers and scientists, inventors, and business people that make these complex systems work. And so as that ecosystem started to build, governments around the world took notice. They recognized this was no longer a physicist toy, but it was really a tool to be used by many. The US government's approach was in 2018 to pass the National Quantum Initiative Act, which coordinated and aggregated already 25-year-old programs across 13 different government agencies into one unified effort. And that effort has seen an explosion of research investment with a key premise that we still have a lot of science to understand so that we can build the field of engineering that takes those inventions and turns them into product. And that bill is up for renewal this year. So it's an 11-year-long process, but 5 years in, Congress gets to put their stamp on again. And so you'll probably be hearing about it a bit over the course of the next 6 months as that goes through the process. But I think the main thing to understand is that the US effort is now much broader. It's bringing in people from wide walks of life, from a diverse set of backgrounds, and it's starting to look closer to the sort of technological initiatives we saw in the 1950s and 60s, in which young people and people with great ideas are given the opportunity to try those things out, but faced with the harsh reality that building these quantum devices at the levels of complexity you're talking about is one of the hardest things we've tried to accomplish technologically. And so, but yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you for setting the stage for how we got where we are. And by the way, we're looking at National Quantum Initiative 2 is what he's saying for the renewal that's in Congress today. Now, Laurie is one of you. She's the National Academy of Inventor, so give her a round of applause for that. The last 2021, I think. But she's also the Undersecretary of Commerce. So now what we want to know from you, Laurie, is what is the government doing to advance quantum technology?
Yeah, so first, let me just say that my inventions were not in quantum science. So I am the non-quantum scientist up here in this panel, but I'm a big believer and supporter of that, of quantum. And NIST has really been playing in this field for a long time, as Jake has pointed out, because of our work in clocks and atomic clocks. You know, the government has been, NIST program is decades long, but the government has been investing very seriously in quantum. Some say for 15 years, but really half of that investment was since 2018. So most of the investment across the government is really in the past couple of years. You know, with the National Quantum Initiative, I think they invested 1.2 billion, or that was what was announced with the National Quantum Initiative, and I think DOE also added another, I don't know, 60 or 70 or 80 million at that time. And then investments went out from NSF, funding basic science, went out from DOE, funding more applied science, basic and applied science. And NIST, you know, NIST sort of continued along its trajectory of really investing in the basic, applied, and all the way to technology solutions and then translational technology, because the goal of NIST is to provide the measurement solutions and the ability to really get at how to measure and understand these systems, so that ultimately that helps the commercialization of these technologies into the marketplace. And so one of the investments that NIST made, besides its investments internally in our science, we also invest in these joint institutes, which we're very proud of, the Joint Quantum Institute, QUICS, the Quantum Information and Computer Science Center at the University of Maryland. Those two are University of Maryland, and JILA out at the University of Colorado. And those three investments, I think, are so critical, not only for really pushing forward the technology, but also for advancing the science, but also for developing the workforce, which has, you know, that workforce that has come out of those three institutes has really fed, I think, the majority of quantum efforts around the United States at this point. And then we also invested in the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, and that the placement of that in this country was really to start to think about this nascent industry, and as it starts to grow and develop, how can we accelerate that? And so there are about 180 companies involved in the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, as well as government agencies and academics who are all there to think about how do we propel this industry forward and create a quantum economy and a quantum marketplace. And so we work in areas like supply chain development, road mapping, how to provide these precision measurements so you can understand the performance of quantum computing. So all of that is really a part of the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. And again, the purpose is to really cement this into the United States economy.
So can you just dig a little deeper there? How is the application of this technology, since it's such a nascent industry, creating a sustainable future in the education and in the workforce going forward?
Yeah, so this is where I don't know the limitations, which is great because I'm not inventing quantum computers, but the dream, right, is that this will be able to, let's say the quantum computing as it develops and starts to be able to answer some of the hardest problems that we have in society right now. So applications of quantum computing to climate change, for instance, or to the understanding of biology and really unlocking the keys to biology so that we can create more sustainable materials using bioengineering. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you dream about quantum computing being applied to. I could probably ask Chris when he thinks that's going to happen, but I don't know if he's going to answer me. But that's the dream of quantum computing, that it really will be there to address some of our hardest challenges known to man, known to mankind, womankind, peoplekind, how about that? Personkind. And at the same time, some of the discoveries in sensing are actually applied right now to a sustainable future. So in 2005, one of the NIST scientists was awarded a Nobel Prize for his work in developing a new technology that is frequency combs that is now being applied to the measurement of methane in oil and gas fields. A company spun out of there called LongPath, and they're doing some amazing work in applying this quantum sensing technology to the measurement of a very important greenhouse gas for that is, I think it's attributed to about 25% of global warming, methane contributions from man-made and from man-made sources. And so it's really important that we understand the sources of methane in our environment, and that's just one application of this technology toward a sustainable future.
Thank you, Laurie. So to the audience, after I've asked my next two questions, if you have a question, please go to one of the mics that are in the aisles, because we're going to turn it over to you. So I've got a couple more questions, then we're going to turn it over to you. So Jake, since, again, this is a nascent research topic, it's still growing, still emerging. However, we don't want to leave anyone out. So what are we doing in the educational system, K to 20, to get more young people involved and knowledgeable about quantum science, quantum STEM areas, and making sure that we don't leave anyone out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you already heard a little bit about how, for example, the government engages through joint centers, through grants and training of graduate students. But the reality is that you didn't choose to be an inventor, when you finished college. You probably got the spark in elementary school, middle school. So one of the key additional elements of the U.S. effort, and which is, I'd like to think, something that's a bit unusual, is to recognize that you've got to get excited about the opportunities of these new technologies early. So back in 2020, the White House launched a program called the Q through 12 Education Partnership. That's, of course, a play on K through 12. And that effort actually recently got a big additional input from the CHIPS Act, which really set aside additional funds to make it flow. But the reality is that there are tremendous opportunities to first get people excited in 7th grade and 8th grade typically. And that's done in part through coordination with societies and academies. And the individuals in those places. That in turn also means teacher training. But it's mostly about recognizing, and this is true in other fields as well, it's recognizing that students don't have to know how to understand the dynamics of the hydrogen atom to be able to program a quantum computer. And it also has to recognize, and you've got to realize, that you don't have to be an expert in electronics in order to help with the plumbing of a liquid helium cryogenic system. So from this sort of initial investment where you get people in middle school and then into high school, and you work with the college board to get the AP exams to include some of these materials, it's not the whole story. It's saying like, hey, 2x2 matrices, hey, conditional probabilities, let's get these things in people's minds, build on them. It's been very interesting, actually, how the mathematics teaching community has gotten very excited about this. Because if you're a math teacher for Algebra 2, you have trouble telling your students why they should care about a matrix. Right. And this is an opportunity to give them an application of matrices that is both obvious and interesting. So there's been a lot of buy-in there. But then you get these people excited, you get them a baseline set of knowledge, and then you have to recognize that there's many pathways forward. So part of it is working with the community colleges and the technical schools, and recognizing, for example, I was working at Riverlane. This is a company based in the UK and the US. Some of our hires didn't have a college degree, right? They were coming in because they knew how to do a very specific set of tasks and were trained in that area. And that was really valuable. And so, you have to recognize that and build those partnerships. Now, the government does part of that. Universities do a big part of that. Obviously, you guys have a number of partnerships across the region making that possible. And then finally, you've got to connect all of these burgeoning, educated people with opportunities. And those opportunities are driven in part by the market, driven in part by government purchasing power, and driven in part by future opportunity. And so I think keeping that milieu together is the hard work of thousands of people working together over the course of the next decade. But I feel like the seeds are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. So last question to Chris, and this is just because you are inventors. So Chris, when did you know you had something? When did you know you had that epiphany moment that you actually had something that you could file for a patent?
Oh boy, when did I know I had something? Well, I have to go way back, probably about 30 years. And I'm not just saying this because Laurie's the director of NIST, but I worked at NIST in Boulder, Colorado for about 10 years. And with Dave Wineland, who was my mentor there and a Nobelist later on, partly based on this work, this sounds esoteric, we were in the atomic clock division at NIST making better clocks with individual atoms. We were playing with individual atoms. We were syncing them together to make the clock run with less noise. That was the project. It turned out we actually operated the first quantum logic gate for a quantum computer. We didn't have any of that terminology. But as Jake said, this application in the 90s that showed that quantum computers could hack information, basically, the whole field and the NSA fell in our laps at NIST because we had the hardware. We were the only place in the world that could do this, even think about it. And I have to say, the moment, I remember even right a little before this algorithm came out, that Dave and I figured, and we worked very closely together, how to entangle two atoms. We didn't call it a gate, we did call it entanglement. And I had no idea how far-reaching that would be, that it could underlie a whole new brand of technology. So it was a very slow aha moment, I think. I think when the factoring algorithm came out for decryption, and then it became clear that this is a new class of computer, I don't think we even filed a patent at the time because it just seemed so scientific. And patents only last a couple of decades, and it would seem, why would we patent this? Let's just publish it. And in the name of open science, we just published it. And but that's probably the aha moment. And then all the engineering that came, a lot of it at Maryland that I recognized in the early 2000s and 2010s. That the engineering, how to really build it well, that's where a lot of the patents came. And through the University of Maryland and the partnership with IonQ, we prosecuted many, many patents that were foundational to that technology.
Thank you, Chris. So now we'd like to open up to the audience. Please come to the microphone and introduce yourself, and then try to be very tight with your questions because we only have about 7 minutes left, and direct it to a particular panelist that you want the question to be answered from.
Okay. My name is Wei Chen from UT Arlington in Dallas area. I have a question about chips. According to the information from the NIST, they say the government is going to put like $55 billion for the chips. My question for you guys is, when the chips become smaller and smaller and the integration higher and higher, we reach the end of the Moore's law. So according to the quantum theory, what is smallest size we can reach for the chips? Like a 1 nanometer, half nanometer, or what?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that if that's okay. So when I was at Riverlane, our whole goal was building and using computer chips to operate quantum computers. So I have some facility on both sides of this question. And just to put it in context, we actually don't know when transistors will stop working. We have guesses, but the guesses so far have been wrong, and they keep working as you get smaller. The reality is actually that the sort of classical dynamics of a transistor are a lot easier to make happen than something that's not the classical dynamics of the transistor. And so, in fact, quantum effects in transistors have been around since they were first invented. They use quantum effects at the baseline. Making those stronger hasn't made them less reliable yet. So I think we can agree that at the single atom level, you lose the robustness of regular transistors. But it's not so clear even at 100 atom level that you have entirely lost this sort of expectation of one error in about 10 to the 12 operations or 10 to the 14 operations you get with typical transistors. So we just don't know yet.
Let me add very quickly that I go out a limb here that I'm not convinced at all that chips will be the basis for a quantum computer anyway. I think the theory is exotic enough that we need to look at other forms of information storage. Individual isolated electrons, single photons that go through waveguides. The technology I work with, individual atoms that are floating above a chip. There's nothing quantum about that chip. It's not very small either. The atoms are very small. So the quantum, the best quantum technology is really out there. It's not, I don't see a path for standard silicon or even superconducting solid state systems to be built into a scalable quantum computer.
Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Hubbard. This discussion is very interesting, and thank you so much. You know, years ago when I was at Maryland, and we're talking about quantum inventions and spawning new inventions in quantum, I was always curious why we couldn't put into the engineering curriculum quantum physics. I always thought that if we taught engineers quantum physics, we would have new inventions in quantum. And I brought that up with my department head, and you know, I got shuffled out of the room, so.
You're listening now, Jim. there's a minor in quantum,
It might have been
quantum engineering.
I can't remember, but
It's coming on this fall.
I want to hear your thoughts on that. Why don't we teach engineers quantum physics as opposed to classical? Oh, and one other comment, please. You know, quantum is a lot more than spin up, spin down, momentum, and et cetera. For example, we're interested in human decision making, and believe it or not, if you try to apply Bayesian probability to human decision making, it doesn't work. But quantum probability does. But whenever we talk about quantum, we're just talking about bits. You know, it's much more than that.
Sure.
And I apologize.
No problem.
I think the way this field started, I mean, the way quantum was developed 100 years ago, it was almost treated as a mystic, not even science fiction. Many didn't believe. Einstein never accepted it. Yeah. And I think engineers, they're practical, and let's face it, all of us have to confront some very fundamental weirdness in this theory. And you're forgiven if you don't believe it, or if you think it just sounds too much. But it is right, it's true, and we have now technology that shows it's coming out. And as Darryll says, the engineers are totally on board right now. I mean, I'm a 50-50 professor of engineering and physics. So I see a big path ahead, and I wish your advice were taken long ago, but I sort of understand that people that people threw you out of the room because they didn't understand it.
Hi there, Walter Voigt from UT Dallas. Being here in DC, there are a lot of geopolitical ramifications of being able to decrypt the last 4 decades of messages that have moved around the world. Do you guys have a sense of the time frame when some of these algorithms will be capable of breaking modern encryption and kind of what that means politically and geopolitically?
I can talk about what we're doing to help secure information against that, but I don't know if you want to talk about prediction of when you think it might be able to break.
Very quickly, I think, in fact, 20 years ago, I think I probably said 20 years and then some. and I'm comfortable saying 20 years and then some still. However, the wild card is that this decryption algorithm it requires a massive system that we really have no idea how to build right now. And my feeling is that we're going to have other applications in the near term, things like machine learning, along the lines Laurie suggested, modeling complex things like financial models or even climate models. Little gains in that direction is going to pave and pay the way toward a huge acceleration to do decryption. So, 20 plus years, I'm not so sure anymore. I think it could be contracted to even, 10 plus years instead of 20 plus years, but it's going to be based on other applications along the way.
And since 2016, NIST has been working in developing of post-quantum encryption algorithms and ran a competition over the past 5 years, and this year is going to come out with standards for people in that area of PQC algorithms. So be looking for that. That's happening very soon.
Yeah, so these are ways to encrypt things that we know that even a quantum computer can't hack. And so NIST is really taking the lead at developing those. But it takes a long time for society to, we're all comfortable with the current public key encryption we use, and it takes a long time and a lot of force to change those standards.
But any previous messages that have been sent and somehow stored are at risk.
Absolutely.
Okay, this will be the last question. We got 45 seconds.
President Pines. I'm Ken Porter, University of Maryland. Chris, Laurie mentioned 3 joint institutes between universities and NIST, and you talked about working in Boulder and kind of described a basic science moment, aha moment, and it's kind of intuitive that that relationship would be supportive of basic science. But could you talk about how government and university collaboration support invention and commercialization?
Right. So I did my graduate work at JILA, which is at the University of Colorado. NIST. I'm sort of a NIST poster child at every run. And then I went to NIST proper in Boulder, and then I worked at JQI at the University of Maryland from 2006 on. Yeah. So they were science missions. There's 4 Nobel Prizes related to quantum that are rightfully claimed by NIST and NIST scientists. And there's always a culture of understanding the science and seeing that, and certainly in the quantum field, that this could be a technology that gets out there. I'm not sure how many companies were kind of formed by this. At NIST, there's a group that's using photons to encrypt things using quantum. If you measure it, you actually you disturb it. But the culture of science toward engineering, I would say, within these institutes is incredibly vital, and it's happening. As we said before, the engineering departments are getting on board. That's the big challenge right now. I don't want to say we shouldn't be doing science and we're not going to learn any more science in quantum. We certainly will. But I think the big challenge in the field is in the engineering front. I don't know if you want to add to that, Jake.
Well, we're at negative time. Very briefly, I had a student. He worked on a machine learning project at the University of Maryland. That machine learning project got picked up in part by some team at NIST. It's now used at Intel to do a set of tasks. So this sort of dialogue is mostly about the people talking to each other, but it happens, and it happens effectively.
Right. I'll just say that NIST has a really long game in mind, where we have co-investments with universities that we expect a very long trajectory and a very long relationship. It's very patient money and patient investment, because we really do have the long game in mind. How can we advance the science together with the best minds in the country?
All right, join me in thanking Laurie, Chris, and Jake for a wonderful session.